Paul, I would say that I'm pretty sturdy in everything I do. I work out, I eat right, go to the gym, stretch, hit the sauna. But despite all that, I'm still off balance. My left shoulder is lower, and I do feel some sort of restriction in movement in thoracic spine in that area. In the long run, I know everybody's fighting against gravity, and I am trying to avoid complications later on the line. I know you specialize in this. How would you peel back the layers of this onion?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. What I would say is that for most of us, yourself included, you have a tech job, and you do spend a fair amount of your time sitting in front of technology. Through our assessment, through our evaluation, we've picked up on a couple of important things. And I would say the most important thing that we picked up on today was that there was a pretty big difference between the output of your right glute and your left glute. So if we just thought about that as like a center point of mass in the human body, and we thought about the body as having, like a building, two beams, two legs that hold it up, what we determined today was that there's a pretty significant lean into your right side, which in turn translates to a change up the body and relevant to the axis of the shoulders. So what we learned was that the left glute being shut down has essentially created a lack of footing or foundation for your left shoulder. So the real question would be, do you have a left shoulder problem or do you have a left glute problem? And I would say, you got a left glute problem, homie.
Got it.
And so the point of this is to say that taking time for anyone that's working hard, taking time for anyone that's putting time in the gym to figure out where your personal portfolio of weakness, imbalance, and asymmetry is, and to have a better understanding of what your actual relationship looks like in gravity, how balanced your brain and body is, has such a crazy carryover into your work output, not only in terms of like how you're gonna age and all the stuff we're talking about, but the things that resonate with you. That's as a young guy who wants to work hard. You want to work hard, but you also want to work smart.
Absolutely.
We're going to help you work hard and work smart at the same time, and that's the goal of this.
Yeah, it's all about finding those weak links, and the weak links that I didn't even know were there. I thought it's the shoulder, but it ends up stemming from somewhere else.
That's right.
And the last thing I want to do is take all this energy I have and the limited time I have for working out and that stuff, although it should be a priority,
Sure.
And just use it poorly. I want to make sure my energy is being placed in the right place, where it's used effectively, and I'm not either contributing to the problem long term, where if I'm building up one side, the other's imbalanced, over time something's going to happen. Like you were saying, I'm going to go lift heavy weight, go for a PR, and something tweaked because one side's weaker. So how would I go about, I know you mentioned the left glute versus the right glute, and the left one's way weaker. How would you go about that? Is it just corrective exercises, or is there other things that come into play with nerve and the neuro side of it?
Sure. So for that, it's a great question. And the beauty of the Neuro Reset Protocol is that there's nothing invasive that goes on here. There's two very basic forms of intervention that we employ, and that would be a process of hands-on manual therapy. And this is something that could be referred to as soft tissue nerve mobilization. And that's a process of placing hand manual pressure over points where nerves get bundled. And the reasoning for this is these would be the places where the body's compensating. So every time you make a bad decision and your ankle rolls out when you squat, it pushes nerves into a compressed position. And the longer that happens, they get stuck. So there's definitely a process that involves going in and unimpinging the nerves. That is something that requires a fairly sophisticated neuromuscular therapist at NRP, somebody with very specific training in that. And then we couple that with a process of very strategic strengthening or activation work. So if it's perceived that we could find a place where the brain is disconnected, a path where it's compensating, it's avoiding using something, odds are that it is not going to be easy to get that part of the body to jumpstart. So we use strategies that feel similar to the same idea of jumpstarting a battery in a car. It's not going to just start back up on its own. It has to be manually jump-started, and the brain has to be reminded of its proper sequence. So much of this is, quite frankly, just very specific corrective exercise. And ironically, the brilliance of this is that it takes one to know one. A person who doesn't understand this concept cannot teach it to somebody else. A person who understands this within their own anatomy and their own body can teach another human this concept. We've taught it to enough to know that that's possible. We're going to teach it to you next.
Yeah, I mean, even from your backstory, the process you had, like, this is not what you intended on doing with your life.
Mm-mm.
You were thrown, we say by God, you were thrown in a place of pain and hurt.
Yes.
And the only way out wasn't a quick fix surgery. It wasn't this, what you tried. You were meant to find this.
That's right.
Learn how to do it, and through your own journey of being able to solve your own problems, now you're able to go to other people and solve their problems.
Yes, sir.
So with what we have going on, that your general approach to this stuff is non-invasive. You go and remobilize the nerves by getting them out of bundles.
Sure.
And then from then on, you can use corrective exercise after the nerves are free and can function.
Correct.
To say, hey brain, this nerve pathway works now. We jump started it. Hey brain, this nerve pathway works now. Let's use the muscles for it, and that way you're able to rebuild that lost link. Okay, I understand. Does that sound right?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, you explained it back perfect. If we're only as strong as our weakest link, NRP is dedicated to determine the point of weak link and to ensure that the brain and the body make its focal point to build the synapse, which is the technical term. A nerve synapse would be this idea that something can't connect. NRP helps you connect, and then we teach you strategies to hold that connection. That's what it's about.
And with teaching those strategies, this is a long-term fix.
Yes, sir.
Right? So it's not that I'm going to go in and only through you, like you're going to teach these strategies to me. So it's not like I'm reliant on you, and when you die, my treatment's over, I'm back to the painful place I was.
Correct.
This is a fix. So not only are these muscles getting rebuilt and the function's getting restored in your body, which then when function is getting restored, you're going to be able to use that function, so it's going to stay there.
Yeah.
That's one permanent side of things. You also teach us, the type of exercises to do to fix it, the approach to it. I'm sure we can go more in depth on a specific problem. Talk about this all day. So what was I trying to ask? I was just kind of stating that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes sense. Makes sense.
That's true, because remember, pain is nothing more than information. And if you changed your perception of what pain is, it's just information. What if you had a different book or source of information that told you how to process it differently? It said every time pain enters, it is actually your body telling your brain to alter behavior. So if you thought it like that and you reverse engineer, well, okay, hold on. Pain is a good thing. It's actually an actionable sequence. It's telling me to do something. So if I stop ignoring it and I move towards it and I actually realize that it's trying to tell me something and I figure out what it is I'm supposed to do, odds are I'm going to have a much better, happier quality of life.
Yeah, instead of just going to find not only ignoring it, the big problem nowadays is because ignoring pain is difficult. People will, that's what I mean, pain point. Like people will eventually strive to find a solution.
Yep.
That's how it works. This could be pain with other things in your life, mentally. It could be physical pain, which is your specialty, right? But the problem is nowadays people are not only ignoring that pain, they're going to get Band-Aids, and they're going to get pills, they're going to get painkillers.
Yes.
And they pop those, the pain goes away, and they think it's a solution, but it's not. You become reliant on those pills. You don't solve the problem gets worse.
It gets significantly worse.
For example, tell me if I'm wrong, but if you take pills that are anti-inflammatory, right? Say you have inflammation in an area, you take pills that are anti-inflammatory. Well, cool, the inflammation goes away, so that's gone. Now you're taking these pills every day that are frying your liver or some other part of your body. But why is the inflammation there? Why not address that cause?
Exactly.
That's exactly what you guys do here.
Yeah, so the analogy that you're making is a great one, right? So the best analogy for that process is the idea of the check engine light. What is a check engine light? It's a warning system. So I have a check engine light. Oh, I'm going to get a cortisone shot. Okay, is that going to solve the check engine light? It is not, right? Is an anti-inflammatory going to solve the check engine light problem? It is not. Pain relief through the advent of medication, shots, etc., is kicking the can down the road. And so inevitably, it's not to say that there aren't examples of people that kick the can down the road and are able perhaps to avoid a more serious intervention. But what's important to consider about that is if behavior remains the same, odds are what this affords us the ability to do is to remove pain, which was the stimulus to tell us to change behavior. And when that goes away, now you could make an argument that I have a much clearer path to actually do real harm to myself. So I would argue that pain relief, if you're not going to alter behavior, is a pretty scary scenario to get involved in. And that's essentially what we're talking about. So absolutely having an understanding of where your pain's coming from and why you're in pain is very important once one starts to consider the options for pain and begins to go on a route of considering pain management options, which do not get to the source of pain, but rather treat the symptoms of pain. Very important consideration to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And people, when they choose which route to take to solve their pain, I mean, there's a lot of options nowadays, right?
There's tons.
I mean, I think the baseline, regardless of where you're at, I mean, if you're extremely overweight and you've never trained any sort of strength training before, you should probably start with a personal trainer or YouTube videos if you're, that kind of, if you don't want to roll with a PT or you don't have the money for it, whatnot,
Sure.
to at least get moving. But once you're moving, then you have a lot of options. I mean, you could keep going with the personal trainers. You can go to, say you start training, you start getting pain because all these years you have been overweight, overburdening a part of your spine, body's imbalanced, gravity's working against you. You got 200, 300 pounds on your legs, on your knees. You have problems all over the place, and they will flare up as you start training, as you get more fit. Then you have an option of what route do I want to take to solve this. You have physical therapists, you have chiros, you have acupuncture, you have deep tissue massage, you have, all these options on the rainbow. I mean, there's people that specialize in different things, and not to throw any of them under the boat. I mean, they're still operational because people do get relief from it. But in terms of, this is how my brain thinks, in terms of the longevity of it, do I really want to be going to a acupuncture specialist for the rest of my life, this same time every single week or bi-weekly to make sure this pain stays away, or do I want to find a more permanent fix? And this is kind of getting back to what we talked about earlier, that this is a more permanent solution.
Yes. So to speak to that and to be clear,
Yeah.
So we live in a world where, we have all these different options that are out there. And this is a very common question that we get asked about, like, what do we think about cupping and acupuncture and chiropractic and all these different things? And so what I always try to say is that, look, I would much rather see a person explore those pathways, alternative pathways, non-surgical, non-pharmaceutical options.
I didn't even mention the surgery.
Yes.
Yeah, see, even my brain's away from the surgery.
Yes.
You go surgical, you go this, injections, like you
Yes.
mentioned. Yeah,
Yes.
Those are on the other extreme. I was more
Yes.
middle ground.
And it's great you think that way, because the truth is that's more what you'd love to see people do as as often as humanly possible. But the answer would be a lot of those things, they are unfortunately pain management tools. So we're using acupuncture and cupping and a lot of these things. If it helps somebody reduce pain, phenomenal. If it gets you out of a situation, great. Those things can work for people. But what we're typically finding is that the kind of stuff we're talking about is much more systemic and takes much more of a strategic effort to change. If somebody wanted to use some cupping and acupuncture and other things along the way, massage, things like this to mitigate their symptoms, I think that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But definitely want to distinguish the difference between doing something for pain management versus engaging in a system that is designed to change the structural well-being of your body and over time change the potential for how your brain to body is wired. And thus NRP as a process to actually rewire the body, and a process that I've personally gone through that has endless applications for not only reducing pain, but returning capacity that in modern times many people don't even think is possible. So hence 2 spine surgeries. I'm jumping with a couple 100 pounds on my back. There's not many doctors that can explain that, after the surgeries and things I've had. Not pushing anybody to do that. That's pretty dangerous. And not many people would want to come back from surgeries and chase doing even more dangerous things. But That's the crazy person I am, I guess, a little
Yeah,
bit.
I mean, if you're the source of all this information and all these teachings, I mean, I would assume you're probably the most sturdy out of any of us.
Well, you'd like to think so, right? So maybe I'm
Walking
doing
around a line sturdy.
That's right.
And being able to jump with 300 pounds. I've seen you
That's
on the
right.
gymnastics rings doing flips and stuff.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and that after 2 spine surgeries. I mean, you literally, if you just say 2 sentences, I've had 2 spine surgeries, and then all of a sudden I'm jumping with 300 pounds on my back.
Yeah.
That's really all it takes. Now, in between that whole process, which is, you guys can go watch the story that we recorded.
Yep.
You walking through how you've got here. But yeah, effectively what we're doing is a permanent solution. You're re-engaging those nerves that have lost function effectively if they're not being used for so long. So that's that rewiring of the brain, as well as strengthening the muscles that weren't used in a while as well. It's just making you more function. They're giving you more function. You go weight train, so then you're able to lift more weights, like say you're able to squat more, so you're able to bench more. Cool. Well, let's do the same with other parts of your body that I didn't know. I've been going to the gym for 2 years. And I'm, aware of a lot of holistic stuff, but you mentioned just from computer clicking with the mouse. This wrist is rotated like this. The nerves are fried in this other half that is unused, and it's leading to other problems. And this could lead to what ear ringing you said, mental problems as well, like in terms of the brain wiring. So people just need to get educated on this.
Right.
Even gym bros like myself that, I thought I had it all together. I even stretch. I go to the sauna. It's not enough.
Nope.
You need to rewire.
Well, think about this for a second. Here's a concept that's like lost on so many people, right? People will ask me about stretching often. What do I think about stretching?
What do you think about stretching?
Well, my thoughts on stretching are deep and profound, but they would be to say that stretch as little as possible, but as much as needed. And really sit with that a moment, and it's like, well, what am I saying? Okay, well, have you ever studied any other mammal? How much do any other mammal stretch? You ever studied a cat or a dog or anything?
Only when it's needed. They wake up.
Yeah, and it's like for like 2 seconds and they're on their way.
Right.
What would you think of an animal if you saw them doing the things you see people doing?
It's like, what, you can't walk normally?
You probably think there's something wrong with you, right?
Yeah.
You're injured. Okay, so use that basic logic and now come back to the idea that, I'm a person who I've explored all these things endlessly, and I'm not trying to talk negatively about this. I've done lots of yoga. I like yoga. It's fun to do it. But just in terms of totality of needs and like getting to a pecking order thing of like what really holds up as you age. And I can say this from the most place of confidence that any range of motion that you attain without really a maximal load of force in that range of motion just doesn't hold up over time. So if you want to get good at being in a deep squat, put some weight on your back and deep squat. If you want to get good at doing the splits, and like you have to get to a point that you're putting the most amount of force through your body in those scenarios. Otherwise, you will wind up with what we call a passive range of motion deficit. So meaning, like here's another way of thinking about this in a long way. The most common problem that my business partner and I run into are like golfers who don't work out, who go to stretch places and get stretched out. And then you wonder like, well, what's so bad about that? Okay, well, here's a guy that doesn't have the mobility to play the sport that he's in, and he's not doing the right things from a strength standpoint to get there. So he goes to somebody that stretches him out. You might think, oh, it's great. Is it? His body's tightening him down to protect him from injury. It's a self-protection mechanism. Tightness is your own body's way of saying, I don't trust you. So if you retrain your brain on that, you go, wait a minute, I'm tight after I do something. It's like, well, you fucked up.
I didn't think about it.
You didn't move the right way. So then the runner who runs wrong is like, I got to stretch afterwards. And I'm like, you didn't run right. It's that simple. Because if I run the right way for long, like I don't feel this need to have to stretch for an hour afterwards. And if I do, I know I didn't do it right, or I wasn't prepared to do the amount or the level of intensity that I was asked to perform. If you watch or follow anything I'm putting out there, I don't stretch very much. And I have the capacity, I'm not saying this from a place of arrogance, I'm saying this from a place of existence and study to say that I'm choosing not to do it because I don't find it of value. And I'm alone on that. I will argue that point endlessly. I have lots of people around me who think stretching is very important. I don't. I think it's probably the most useless thing on earth.
I think it's if you want to use stretching to its most effective, capability, it's okay, stretch, open up that range of motion, but then load it.
Yes.
If you don't load that new range of motion.
Correct.
So say with the bicep, very simple example. I mean, say I've been lifting just the top half, right?
Yep.
And then, all right, I'm gonna stretch it out to make sure it's not as tight.
Yep.
Cool. And then I go back and just lift it on the top half. It's not doing anything. If I try to, be careful, because once you expose your body to a new range of motion with heavy weight, that's when stuff breaks. But I mean, that would be an effective way to use stretching from what you told me, if people still want to stretch.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, it's fixing underlying problems, not just stretching and calling it a day.
The common scenario that many people are engaging in is using like loading stretching techniques, which I like some of that stuff. Don't get me wrong. Let's say we were talking about doing a straddle stretch where I'm, on a row and I'm pulling myself into it, my legs real wide and just letting it pull me forward into like a bend. That's the type of stretching that has the most benefit. But if you really think about it, you're just eccentrically loading yourself into a position, a squatting position, a lunging position, whatever it might be, and essentially using force to pull yourself into the position. I'd argue that all we're doing is redefining strength training. Like if you really go through it and you really reverse it, it's like we're just changing the perspective of what strength training is.
I mean, even for like the rotator cuff, like I've gone, before I do any push exercises, I've started strengthening it with the cable.
Yes.
It's like I didn't go into that. Okay, I didn't have a problem, but I was just more preventative. Hey, let me stretch my rotator cuff and then I'm good to go. It was no, let's just strength train it.
Yes.
I don't stretch my rotator cuff.
There's also something that's very difficult to talk about. I hate having to bring this up, but there is a component of this that in real life and in performance gets exposed pretty bad, which is to say that many of the people that promote the merits of stretching and a lot of these philosophies lack the ability to engage in some of the more extremes of athletic endeavors. So these ideas sound great until you see these same people in many cases sprinting to maximal levels, squatting to maximal levels. And then you kind of realize to a degree that when you push the body to its like highest end potential, people tend to get a little asymmetrical and a little bit imbalanced. And so then you start to see it play out a little bit differently, which is that how does life really play out? Is it this idea that like I get it perfect when I give everything and then I have to go and like refine it a little bit later on? Or do I stretch myself into perfection and land in this place? So this would be like analogy-wise, conceptually, because I do these things and chase this. I would make an argument that from a stretching standpoint, the things that I find of the greatest value that bring me the most benefit would be like when I have a couple 100 pounds above my head with my arms locked out and my legs in about as deep of a split as I can get into. And it's the drive of the force that comes from above and just the straddling and bouncing of it that's both a strength endeavor, but also stretching at the same time, that creates the most longevity around useful flexibility that actually transcends into real functional aspects versus these things where people are just stretching for like, what's the point of it? Like you can get into a position. Okay, now guess what? I need you to go and march and carry things back and forth for an hour. Show me the yogi who's doing that and how that holds up. It doesn't.
Yeah,
no one wants to talk about it like this, but this is the truth of it. This is just, there's so many of us that are caught up in perspectives that do not have functional applications. And I'm saying it this way because I, like many people, have been pushing this idea that yoga was going to save me from it. It did not. And we help tons of yogis. I just saw a yogi this morning, who's frankly a wonderful, wonderful person who's suffering from a lot of back pain from years and years of doing yoga, And it's nothing wrong with yoga. Yoga's great. But again, if yoga didn't balance out with the right amount of strength training, odds are that as you age, you will begin to experience moments where there is significant joint change. And if we get caught up in perspectives and ideologies and we don't make the right moves, we're done. And this is where I'm a very unique person because I don't have any loyalty to any one thing, including my own system. If somebody comes up with something better, fuck it.
You're in.
You're in.
Awesome. Yeah. So it's useful flexibility. Useful. It can't just be fluff.
Flexibility, yes.
It can't be fluff. And now you mentioned yogis have came in. Mm-hmm. Alex this morning, I know him too. Personal trainer. Mm-hmm. Looked up to. Yogis looked up to, respected by all these people that are just getting into fitness.
Yeah.
They're looking up to these people, and these people are looking up to you.
Yes.
So you're effectively, the king of the hill here. Why do all these, not to get into the details of this is wrong, this is not wrong, everybody has their place, especially, when you're dealing with beginners, it's better to do something than do nothing. But what do you do differently than these guys for them to come to you? Like, maybe a better way to phrase this question is, we mentioned flexibility. Why flexibility? Just flexibility won't work. But what about the other ones? Why isn't just gym bro training like I am working to increase the longevity of what we're doing here?
Because unfortunately, and as much as most of us don't want to admit this, the landscape of our current existence is more challenging than it's ever been. And whether we want to accept this as a reality or not, the advent of the computer system has gone hand in hand with the invention of physical therapy. If computer systems don't come on board, we don't see the growth of physical therapy. So the reality is that the use of technology is not generally good for us, and we see, unfortunately, a rise in scientific ability to explain that Wi-Fi, bone use, unfortunately creates a certain low-level radiation and a certain amount of fraying that exists in the human body. And I think to some degree, we all should just kind of accept that it's not great for us, but it is absolutely undeniably the future. And it's not to move away from it, but rather to prepare your body for the bumps and roads that will ensue. And we're suddenly in this really weird moment where we have a misalignment around the environment we're in, which is, I'd argue, it's dangerous to not strength train in modern times. If you work and you're sedentary and you sit all day and you don't strength train, it's dangerous.
Would you say this might be I don't know, unnecessary question, but would you say is being sedentary and strength training better for you, or how would I say this? The sedentariness causes misalignment, right? Mm-hmm. So is being misaligned and strength training better for you, or is being misaligned and not strength training better for you?
So
obviously the choice is to come to you and get realigned to make sure you're doing everything properly. Sure. But what would you say?
So I would say that, so for the person, let's say, who's sitting at home, who's just struggling with this idea about working out or not working out, what do I do, what do I not do? I would argue that the best thing you can do is begin focusing on posture, begin focusing on making sure that you have balance in your gait, walking, sitting, standing, and make as much of a concerted effort as humanly possible to try to become aware of what your tendencies are and begin building strategies to offset them. So thus, if you are able to pick up on the fact that you lean to your right side, switch the mouse to your left hand for a period of time. So the most basic things that a person can start doing here are use forcible strategies to shift tech use to the other side of your body. So one of the most basic recommendations, prescriptions I would have here would be to say, if you've been mousing for the last 5, 10, 20 years on your right arm, switch, change it up. And then go through the process of feeling your brain and body try to rewire to the other side. And again, there's a multitude of reasons to play around with this, but if you weren't able to strength train, if you weren't able to get into the right strategies, this is the most basic thing you can do. Yeah. Is just force it to the other side. Or at minimum, force yourself to go back and forth and just start playing around with the idea of, oh my God, I really am built out to do something on one side. It's almost like causing all this anxiety and stress to try to send the signals. This is where, again, when you asked me earlier about what makes us different, the scientific rationale and understanding we have around that and basically building this out for the last decade, it's significant. And the information we have, I would argue, is novel and proprietary around this. And having taught and trained a number of other clinicians over the years and getting a sense of what's out there and what people know, I think we're pretty far ahead on this at the moment. So
yeah, the fixes are simple. I mean, that one switch, but the logic is there.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to even get caught up. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but like people might think, oh, it's an easy fix. Let me do this, and then it's still wrong.
Yes.
It's like, no, you paired the complexity and it works with the easy fix, which is why it's very sustainable. Yes. That's the long term.
Yes.
I want to get back to this point. You've had yogis, you've had clinicians. Clinicians?
Yeah, clinicians.
Clinicians. You've had personal trainers over. what are some of the high-level people beyond just clinicians and people that are serving others? Like, I know you've had NFL players here.
Oh, sure.
What are some of the high-level people that you can say that have come here and some cool stories from them? Because obviously, if you're in the NFL, you have all the connections in the world to get treatment. You have all the options open. You have all the money in the world to spend. Why you?
Well, as we have in a number of testimonials, and we'll continue to put this stuff out there into the world, we are able to do some things that no one, to my knowledge, is currently capable of doing. And that involves a very, very unique and specific process of nerve mobilization, particularly involving the feet. That's probably the thing we're doing right now that is really standing out. So I could tell you an endless number of stories about that kind of stuff. I've manipulated so many feet over the years of high-level athletes, and people who've ever had this done can certainly appreciate this. It's so subtle. It's very painful to have it done. It can feel, very uncomfortable. But let's think about it like this: a bunion. You know what a bunion is, right?
At the end, yeah.
Right. So it's like the protrusion on the big toe. So before you see a big bunion, you'll typically see the beginning of a bunion, which will look like, if that was the toe, you'll just start seeing kind of getting smashed together, almost sometimes even overlapping. So in athletes, that is the death of a career. Losing your big toe for most athletes, particularly in sports like football or any sport where you got to cut or change direction, this is the beginning of the loss of athleticism. So I could tell you endless stories, and many of these are just hilarious because they involve a lot of times a lot of eyeballs and a lot of people from different parts of the country, and a willing and acknowledgement that they can't seem to find this anywhere else, that whatever we're doing is enabling them to find the ground and to feel the ground in a way that nothing else does. And anyone who's ever experienced that knows what I'm talking about. The feeling of feeling the ground after the foot has been manipulated is often described as feeling the ground for the first time, feeling what grounding is supposed to feel like, feeling one foot level out the way the other one does. That is the part of this concept that kind of sets us apart. And I'm not aware of anywhere else in the world right now where that is able to be performed. And again, it gets into the very specific nature of what we understand that differentiates us from the marketplace right now. And that's one of the reasons why people are coming here. That's why the athletes come here. And again, I don't think too many people will argue against the importance of the feet for grounding, but I'm not aware of any other process out there that knows how to facilitate this at the moment. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. You mentioned grounding. Roger that with
Yeah.
the feet. That's new. I'm still processing that information. Bunion.
Yeah.
All of you guys have bunions and
Yeah.
starting to form some.
Yeah.
Go visit Paul.
That's right.
I want to do this to wrap this up.
Yep.
I want to do quick fire.
Yep.
We mentioned a lot of things. We mentioned grounding. And listen, if somebody gets offended from this, whatever, right? I want your unfiltered, honest opinion. I'm going to list things out like stretching we touched on. I also will hit on grounding.
Yep.
We're going to hit on the sauna. And I want you to either say ineffective, it's okay if used correctly, or it's awesome, you guys should do it.
Okay.
And you guys should do it and include it into your routine. Okay? So I'm going to start listing some stuff off as it comes to my brain.
Okay.
Let's start off with where we're at. Grounding in terms of getting outside and stepping on grass. What's your take on that?
I think it's great.
Great?
It's great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We're going to quick fire
cool.
these. Stretching, just to recap what we talked about. What would you say?
Yeah, I would say again, same thing, which would be as little as possible, but as much as needed.
So it's all right.
It's okay.
As long as it's used correctly.
Yeah, it depends on how you use it.
Okay.
Is the better answer.
So
It's
middle
right?
ground.
Middle
Okay. Acupuncture.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I like acupuncture.
Should people in
For pain management, it's a good option for changing your overall structure and anatomy.
Oh, let's do this. Let me rephrase my question then.
Yep.
List out pain management, restructuring, or ineffective.
Okay.
That's what it'll be. So acupuncture is pain management.
Pain management.
Grounding, very broad topic. What would you
Yep.
say that is?
I would say that's just an effective tool to implement in your life. That's something you want to have.
You want to.
You want to have grounding in your life.
Okay,
You want to
so you should-
understand it. You need to understand grounding. If you don't understand grounding, that's something that needs to be a part of your life. Yeah.
Awesome. Saunas.
Absolutely should be a part of your life. Fundamental.
And really briefly, in 2 or 3 sentences, why? Let me get your take.
Well, there's lots of reasons, but the most basic is not enough people sweat.
Not enough people sweat.
Like, so it's a forcible workout, if you want to think about it like that. And it moves blood around, it moves inflammation, it's tied to longevity. I mean, it's just, you'd be stupid not to do a sauna.
And now I know what you also have back there, red light.
Red light. Red light, in my opinion, is, it's good. I think you should do it, but I think it's super overhyped.
Overhyped.
So totally overhyped.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's still some effectiveness, but you'd rather see somebody restructure.
Yeah, like best example for red light is like, should you be going out of your way to do like a red light sauna? No.
Yeah, you shouldn't drive an hour to go to red light sauna.
No. Like, my point is, though, if you're going to do a sauna, do a good sauna. Do a hot sauna.
Yeah.
Like, don't do a red light sauna. If you want to do red light, stand in red light for a period of time, fine. Do a light bed, do the LEDs, whatever. But the benefits of red light are arguably still relatively minimal. If we were talking about and ranking things, like if you're comparing a workout, a really good workout, or like being in red light for 20 minutes, like a workout is better than a red light all day, every day. It's a nice tool for recovery. I think it's a nice option to have, but I think we're beginning to go through a weird period where people are like confusing it as like more important than a workout.
Yeah, it gets hyped up.
It gets really hyped up.
With a lot of other things. This is the same thing. Like, I'd rather see somebody eat right and train as a base standard before even getting into all these details.
Yeah, and again, the point is, like, I'm not against it. I like it. We have it. We use it. I'm not trying to come off negative towards it. It's just, it'd be like towards the bottom of my,
I understand.
Areas.
If somebody came in here and they only have an hour of their time, you'd want them doing something else, not standing around in the red light.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
Yeah.
Now, you also have back there the cold plunge. So cold exposure.
Yeah, hugely important. Tricky sometimes to talk about. Purely from the standpoint of it moves inflammation around the body. It has some really profound implications, but as is a lot of the research continuing to show, it's got to be timed appropriately on workouts. And in my strongest personal opinion, it seems to work best when you kind of combine it with the sauna and use the contrast therapy.
Hot and cold therapy.
Hot, cold. And if anything, the way I use the cold bath more these days is really just to stay in the sauna for longer. So I'll do 3, 4, 5 minutes of cold, but most of the time it's just to be in the sauna then for an hour. So if I can be in 200 degrees for almost an hour because I did 6 or 7 minutes in the cold plunge, that's actually the advantage of the cold plunge. I never used to think about it that way, but as time's gone on and as more research and my own research has evolved with it, and I've built my body up to actually need it less, I've really began to appreciate that the challenges with it associate more with keeping tissue on your body. So I'm a rare person in that I'm trying to be like a bodybuilder as I'm getting older here, keeping tissue on my body, and I can genuinely feel how it eviscerates tissue.
Eviscerates?
It eviscerates tissue. So like if you have things that are forming in your body and you have inflammation sitting and building tissue, it'll wipe it out. So you go in there and like you'll feel different, but that's inflammation being pulled out of your body. And it's like, well, is that always good? It's like, well, inflammation's healing. Inflammation is change, it's growth, it's building. So you got to remember you're doing something kind of serious when you mess around with that. So I think we're at the beginning of people even only barely understanding that concept. And I would argue, like, even as I drop that on you now, you probably never thought about it like that.
People have said like, don't like. I heard do cold therapy or cold plunge before working out, not after, because it does get rid of the inflammation, and inflammation is what you want to grow muscle.
Yes.
That's what I've heard.
Yes.
From. Well, I'm not mainstream, but from my mainstream. Yeah.
Yes, okay, good. So that's generally the idea. But if you take that a step further and thought more about the idea that, let's say we were even just talking generally about like somebody more in their 40s, where like it just takes longer for tissue to build. So you might be even 2 days later, but after a really hard workout, but like things are still sore in a certain way. And like as you get older, you start to appreciate that soreness in a different way. You're going like something's growing. So then you kind of associate, okay, like if I push that inflammation out, did I push out the growth? And I would argue you are.
Yeah.
So it has a lot to do with that. And so then as I've gotten older and I continue to evolve here, I'm like, I don't do them as much as I used to. And the reason I'm not is because I actually see it as an anti-growth thing.
Right.
So I mostly only want to do them now when I'm doing the sauna, and it's like a recovery day. And I'm only going to do that typically 1 day a week because I like to work out 6 days a week if I can.
There you go.
So that's it.
Maybe I should incorporate that in my Sunday.
You should.
My rest day.
There you go.
Get a sauna, get a cold plunge.
There you go.
It can't be no crappy one. It's got to go above 200.
That's right.
There you go. All right. I
Cool.
think that wraps it up.
Okay,
Awesome.
bro. Good stuff, man.